Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming to our ECHO session today. My name is Jahidra Castillo, and I'm in my last semester of my entry-level doctoral program. And I am researching the effectiveness of this virtual program to increase your confidence and your knowledge on various topics. Today, there will be a 30-minute presentation and a real case study for discussion. You will learn from one another and will have your knowledge re-examined through a local lens. Through shared support, guidance, and feedback, this will lead to a collective understanding of how to implement the best occupational therapy practices across diverse settings. This program is free and available due to your participation in this research study. Therefore, it is highly encouraged that you complete any survey links that you receive before and after the session. You will not receive a certificate of attendance unless you complete the pre and the post surveys sent to your email. If you have any questions, I will send my email in the chat. But without further ado, I would like to now introduce Miss Anna.
Thank you, Jahira. Thank you, Dr. Barlow, for putting this together and giving me the opportunity to share today. Welcome to Handwriting Development and Intervention Approaches for School-Based OTPs. This is the second week of the 6-week series. My hope is that some of what I'll be sharing today will be relevant in some way to your practice, and I've tried to include really practical activities and strategies that can be used across settings, across economic classes, and that you can customize to fit the need to your population that you serve. This slide shares a snapshot of my educational journey so far that has brought me to where I am today as an OT. I have been in OT since 2006. It also has my email address. Please feel free to reach out to me if you want to collaborate further beyond this talk today. My experience includes work in the US as well as pediatric volunteer work in Malawi, Kenya, and Benin. I have 3 amazing children. Currently, they're 16, almost 12, and almost 6. Currently, my full-time job is practicing as a school-based OT, providing all services via telehealth through a publicly funded charter school in California. I work both directly with students as well as developing tiered intervention groups, where I'm mainly consulting with teachers to put together handwriting clubs, sensory integration clubs, and groups that they then run. I've worked with all grade levels in the school system, but currently the majority of my students are in the K through 5th grade band, which is roughly ages 5 through 10 for those of you that might not be in the US and know about our US system. Today I'll be presenting for about 30 minutes, and then we'll look at a case study that you will discuss in breakout rooms, and then we'll return, and I'm eager to hear and excited to hear about your discussions. So for our objectives, we'll be looking briefly at body structures and functions involved in handwriting, from the musculoskeletal system to sensory motor components, and then spend some time breaking down the task and the occupation of handwriting and how we as OTs can provide interventions to build these skills. So to begin, how do we go from this infancy stage where we're dependent little human beings that rely heavily on automatic reflexes and really on other people to survive, to little bodies that can eventually control movements and responses to sensory input that allow for this functional and purposeful play and activities, including handwriting and drawing. Handwriting and drawing skills are so much more than just producing and copying symbols on paper. It's really about giving our students a way to communicate their thoughts and ideas in written form. On this slide, you're looking at my youngest daughter. This is my youngest daughter at 3 months old, and she's displaying the ATNR reflex, that asymmetric tonic neck reflex at 3 months old. The picture in the middle was just earlier this school year, where she's sitting, supporting herself, playing with Play-Doh at a table. And then when we look at this drawing that she made just a few months ago, we can see clearly she's using lines and curves and circles and triangles. And that's really telling a story about our family. You can see all the people in our family, including our little dog. Our dog's name is Laika. You can see she tried to spell out Laika. As we dive into all the moving parts of handwriting and drawing, I just want to have the mindset that we're really trying to help students build these skills that enable them to communicate and share their thoughts in written form. So to begin, the next 4 slides are really a very brief overview of the hand anatomy and the peripheral and nervous systems involved. Each hand has 27 bones with joints that allow for a variety of movements that we make. Hand bones change from soft cartilage to hard bones throughout development. In fact, at birth, all of the carpal bones are fully cartilage. So if you look at an x-ray of a newborn, you won't see any of those carpal bones because they haven't gone through the ossification process. And the ossification process is not uniform across people. And in fact, it can be impacted greatly by nutrition, as well as congenital and syndromes, different syndromes. Fully articulated joints and bones are continuing to develop even through adolescence, and not fully developed really until puberty. So we'll start looking at the intrinsic muscles of the hand. We know that bones by themselves are not going to be doing any movement. They need muscles to move them across the joints. The intrinsic muscles of the hand are those that are inside of the hand. These are responsible for the fine motor and dexterity functions. We have the thenar muscles that control the thumb opposition, hypothenar that controls the little finger opposition, and then the interossei and lumbricals control abduction, as well as controlling the flexion or at the MCP joint, while extending this IP joint of the fingers. Some of the dexterity functions we observe during functional tasks include precision, which is the ability to control finger and thumb movements to pick up small objects, for example. Opposition, which is used to hold writing utensils and eating utensils. We use pad-to-pad pinching when we're doing activities like turning a key or picking up coins. Finger isolation allows us to do things like type or play the piano. Intrinsic muscles also play a role in stabilizing the hand, so helping control one side of the hand while the other side is really moving and controlling the movement that you're doing. They're closely connected to sensory receptors of the hand that are providing constant feedback to the brain about the position and force applied during hand movements. The extrinsic muscles all originate outside of the hand, so originating mainly in the forearm. Only the thin tendon of that muscle is actually directly in the hand. Some of the functional characteristics that we can measure that have an impact on performance that include strength, which is the ability to contract and resist force actively. Tone, which is the tension of the muscle at rest. We know that low tone results in less tension and the muscle feeling floppy, or high tone, which would result in more rigidity in those muscles. And endurance, the tolerance for continuing to contract and engage a muscle against resistance. So now that we've done a very quick overview of the musculoskeletal system involved in hand development, we'll review some of the peripheral and central nervous components. I say this is where the magic happens, where communication is happening at lightning speed, traveling through sensory and motor. I call it the superhighway. And for our hands, they're innervated by the radial, ulnar, and median nerves. And this shows a very basic diagram of the flow of information from the sensory input coming in through those sensory receptors, traveling up that superhighway to the brain, which then sends the message to the muscle. We know when all these physical structures are working as intended, and they're not any blocks, or I like to call them traffic jams in the superhighway, we can do amazing things. We can train our bodies to do very refined movements, including handwriting and drawing, dancing, playing piano. But we know that even a small breakdown in any one of these structural pieces can contribute to difficulties in functional performance. So keeping in mind all these anatomical structures involved in hand and arm function, I'm going to transition to looking at handwriting as an occupation and break the task of handwriting down a little bit. Our role as OTs is to promote function and participation as school-based OTs. This includes supporting the development of legible handwriting so that they can fully participate in classroom activities and benefit from their education. There is a strong evidence base supporting the active role that handwriting plays in promoting literacy, so learning to read and write. The earlier we can get involved in helping our struggling students, the better. So to begin the task analysis of handwriting as an occupation, we'll start by looking at posture. Posture is really, really important. One of the fundamental basics in the biomechanics involved in really any kind of movement is that you have to have proximal stability before you can control and refine distal mobility. If the core is in control, those distal muscles of the arm and hands will be able to move with more control and stability. If the student has a condition, let's say, such as cerebral palsy or another condition that limits their postural control, we need to be looking at adaptive seating options that will promote this optimal positioning, so that the student's not spending all of their physical and mental energy just to maintain that upright position while they're trying to develop fine motor and tabletop activities. One of the handouts that you have access to through the ECHO platform has an outline of specific activities that you can do to build these 4 supporting skills. It has a description of how to set up the activity and what specific skill is being developed. So please check out that handout and then adapt it to what you have available. Most of them use little to no supplies or very easy to find supplies. And if I have time, once I get through the talk, I'll just briefly show you what the handout looks like so you have an idea of what it looks like. So continuing on to look at the components involved in handwriting, being able to describe what kind of grasp pattern a student is using is really helpful when it comes to developing an appropriate intervention plan and describing what we're seeing. Here you'll see a typical progression of grasp from infancy years through those school years. By the time a student is in that 5 to 7 year range, they should be able to control the movement of the pencil or marker by coordinating the thumb and pointer fingers while stabilizing with that ulnar side, that pinky side of the hand. When we look at specific pre-writing shapes that provide a foundation for handwriting skills, this shows a typical progression, starting with that vertical line through a diamond. These are shapes that are typically included in some of the assessments that we typically use. Here's a basic overview of drawing skills. The picture on the left is of wooden sticks and a blue mat from the Learning Without Tears handwriting curriculum. Here my student has rearranged the sticks and curves and the mat to make a monkey. This is one strategy for teaching those early drawing skills, to use hands-on manipulatives of basic shapes that the student is interacting with and moving to create a shape, and then eventually having them replicate what they've made with manipulatives on paper. And you don't have to use curriculum bought manipulatives. You can use toothpicks, popsicle sticks, pieces of hay, straw, whatever is available. Straight lines, curves are the main shapes that we use to make all of our letters. So getting them familiarized with straight lines and curves is really important. And here is at a glance the progression of handwriting skills. This sentence was written by my 5.5-year-old just earlier this year. And this was the sentence of her choice. I love to play with baby dolls. And this does bring up a good reminder that if we have them write about things that are of high interest, we're going to get much better buy-in. If we can coordinate with the teachers to find out what they're learning about, if they have a specific friend or a family member, making it meaningful to them is you're gonna have a lot higher participation and interest from the student. The next few slides are gonna dive deeper into some specific strategies and how to build specific components within handwriting. This is just an outline of how to place the paper and that grip, both for left-handed and right-handed writers. When I did my handwriting certification course, they stressed practice makes permanent. How you practice matters. So as opposed to practice makes perfect, and that really stuck with me because it really does make sense. If we can build those good motor habits from the beginning, it's going to be so much easier than having to unlearn bad habits. So practice makes permanent. How you practice matters. The first, and I think one of the most crucial handwriting components, is memory. So can the student recognize the letters? And this component doesn't have anything to do with pencil and paper. It's simply the memory aspect of knowing what an A looks like, what a B pointing to letters in books and stories that you're reading and seeing it, if they can just even recognize what the letter looks like. Another important component is called orientation. So which way are the letters facing? Can the student identify up and down, left and right? Can they do this on their own bodies? Can they struggle with right and left on their own bodies? So we might spend some time doing movement and rhythm games with our own bodies, focusing on directionality. So up, down, left, right, eventually transferring that knowledge to the paper. And identifying, you know, the B has the straight line on the left and the curve on the right. One other fun way to remember the B and D: B wears a belly and the D wears a diaper, to just give the concept of where to place that curve in that straight line for those commonly reversed letters. Letter size is another important component that contributes greatly to legibility. In general, we have 3 sizes. We have tall, small, and fall letters. I like to use color coding for the different categories. Here you'll see the tall letters are in blue, the small letters are in red, and the fall or digging letters are in yellow. I will sometimes use the imagery of digging letters and enjoying digging in the sand at the beach. There's also different types of paper out there. There's one called sky, grass, dirt. So those tall letters go into the sky, the small letters stay in the grass, and those digging letters go into the dirt. It's really important to find out what curriculum the student is using in their classroom setting, and specifically what font is being taught, so that you can match the starting point and sequence that their teacher is exposing them to. But more often than not, at least here in the States, you will find that no explicit instruction is being given for handwriting. And this is where our consultation with teachers and administration becomes important, where you can propose either curriculum or just a plan to provide structure for teaching letter formation, and not just expecting kids to pick it up on their own. The Handwriting Without Tears curriculum teaches starting all the letters at the top. This is really to help with that motor planning and fluidity. Some kiddos really benefit from that starting spot, starting, and you can do that just with the highlighter on their paper if they need to get that initiation spot, a visual for that. The sequence refers to the order of each of the strokes to form a letter. Again, it's important to have a letter strip available that matches how their teacher is teaching them to form their letters. And if the teacher doesn't have one, use it as an opportunity to share one with them so they can be consistent and provide the same visual across their classroom setting and students. And then as we move from individual letters to words, we need to look at spacing between the letters and spacing between words. I like to use boxed letters, boxed words, and then transitioning to those tri-lines. This can help with fading those visual cues and refine those components of spacing. There are many handwriting assessments out there. These are some that I'm familiar with and have used. Learning Without Tears also has a free handwriting screener available on their website, but their full assessment's called the Print Tool. These are all going to measure to some degree the components that we just reviewed involved in handwriting. One of the tools I just wanted to highlight for this specific group, since we have people from around the world, is called the Schoodles Fine Motor Assessment. It's a non-standardized criterion-based, performance-based assessment. Once you purchase it, you have access for life, even if they update materials and you don't have to buy individual protocols. So it's really nice because once you do the initial investment, you have access to everything. They have a huge resource library for the therapist for the assessment tools, as well as rubrics and goal setting and printable materials for the students. It's all digital, and they've most recently added a full intervention program that uses a comic book style story to teach the components of handwriting. And one of our clubs at our school is using this right now, and it's very popular with the kids. I highly recommend checking out their website, and it's referenced right there on the slide. This is there's a whole section in the Schoodles Fine Motor Assessment dedicated to goal writing and rubrics. This is an example of a strengths-based approach handwriting goal that they include along with a legibility rubric. I won't go through it in detail, but it's there for your reference. For the last part of my presentation, I'll be sharing some recommendations for school-based OTPs as it relates specifically to our role addressing handwriting in the school. These recommendations came from a systematic review that was published in AJA in 2020. The 4 do's were use activity-based practice, have students self-evaluate their handwriting, use handwriting curricula that includes sensory motor activities, and co-teaching and collaborating with teachers. The article specifically called out to OTs to not only provide isolated training on foundational skills, so to not only do the in-hand manipulation or visual perception activities, there has to be a component of the intervention that's addressing one of those 4 components at the top. So when we're thinking about how to approach our assessment intervention, I really like this visual. It highlights 2 different approaches. There's the bottom-up approach that starts by zooming in on the body function and structures, while the top-down approach starts by focusing on the analysis of the participation in the activity itself. And right now, much of the evidence is pointing us towards using this top-down approach instead of the bottom-up approach. So what are some practical ways we can provide some of these top-down participation activity-focused interventions? Here are just some activities. It's mainly making the activity meaningful, using words that they're exposed to in the classroom, family names, build it into their routines during the day. If you're lucky enough to work in a school setting where collaboration and co-teaching is expected or the norm, this can be really effective. We cannot possibly do this with every student and every teacher, but finding that one teacher that is eager to partner with you can really help you get started with this. I find that when I approach collaboration with teachers as an opportunity for me to help them with their load instead of adding something more to their plate, I get much better buy-in. There are many, many curricula out there, so this will vary from state to state and really country to country, but being aware of what is being used with your students is really important, and then knowing some to recommend is also important too, and I have some listed on my resource page for you. Here I've outlined a simple 1 to 2 minute whole body finger warm-up that can easily be done as a whole class or individually during OT sessions. I'll just highlight, probably just have time for 2 of my favorite warm-ups. This is called the spider doing push-ups in a mirror. You're welcome to join me if you would like, but you line up your fingertips and we're gonna press. That spider's gonna push up against the mirror and push away 5 times or 10 times, whatever you have time for. But we're building those muscles in those spider legs. Kids will sometimes enjoy making up their own name for their warm-up, so that's a fun activity too. My second go-to favorite is fireworks. So we'll collect all the energy into our palm, pull, squeeze. And we're gonna count down from 3 and we're gonna shoot fireworks out our fingertips. So 3, 2, 1, and it gets all those muscles activated. And some kids that are into Star Wars, these are lightsabers. You just make it fun for the kids, and you're really wanting to activate both those intrinsic muscles and just getting all of those neurons firing before we do any pencil and paper tasks. It really doesn't take long to warm up the hands, and you can make it really fun. And here are just some more handwriting warm-up activities to get the whole body ready for those tabletop activities. I've included a link for you to download this free adaptive paper. That includes a letter strip and a student checklist. This one is aiming more towards that K through 1st grade line placement. And at the link, there's also another version for 2nd through 5th grade version where the lines are a little bit closer together. I won't have time to go into detail here since the focus was on handwriting, but it's really important to consider accommodations and any technology that might help our kiddos with participating in written expression activities, especially once you're getting into that 3rd and 4th grade age range, depending on their condition. It might even be appropriate to consider as early as kindergarten, giving them a way to produce written work that eliminates the motor component if their condition is really going to make that hard for them. Because again, our purpose is to give them access to producing written output. So whether it's pencil and paper, whether it's using technology, now most schools in the US have access to what's called PDF annotator tools, which allows students to take any worksheet and use digital tools to complete it. So really, the most important thing being that if we're going to consider accommodations, there should be a step where we're simulating it. So if we think that using word prediction tools or keyboarding is going to help the student participate better in written expression, let's do a trial. Let's try it out. Let's do a small grade level task assignment and actually measure and see, is there more success doing it this way compared to with the handwriting? As I close up my time presenting, I wanted to highlight the importance of considering cultural and environmental factors when we are working with our kiddos. We absolutely need to adapt our interventions to meet the students and our families where they're coming from and what is meaningful and relevant to them. And this can only happen if we're collaborating with the families and teachers to know what their environments, what their school, what their home looks like, and what they have access to. My hope is that as our profession grows and continues to expand into more and more countries, we'll have more and more variety tools that use more culturally relevant and normed on a greater variety of populations. Currently, we definitely have limited options for tools made for and normed with populations outside of the US or other developed countries. But I just wanted to share one tool that I had the privilege of working with in my time in Malawi. It's called the Malawi Developmental Assessment Tool, and you'll see in this picture, the assessment items we used are all locally available items from the market in Malawi. And although this was not a tool addressing handwriting skills, I wanted to bring it up as an example of how the materials we use should be relevant to the population that we're working with. So in the context of handwriting, this includes knowing what notebooks, what type of paper, what type of pens and pencils the student is actually expected to work with within their school environment, within their home environment. Please do check out the resource page. Most of these links have access to free printable resources. At the bottom of this slide, there's links to many of the resources I use as a virtual school-based therapist. If you haven't heard of Boom Cards and you do any type of telehealth or virtual therapy, check it out. It's a student favorite. This is my Boom store where I've made a lot of free decks and some very low cost decks to address handwriting components and other components that we work on in school-based OT. If you'd like to check out some of the references and materials that I use to help put this together, I think most of these articles are open access, so you can just click through the links. How am I doing on time, Jahaira?
You are doing great. You have about a minute left before or 2-3 minutes left before case study.
Awesome. Okay, so I will have time to just walk through real quick the specific activities for intervention. So this is a handout that you can, it should be posted with the presentation slides. So feel free to download this. It's basically just walks through how to set up a few activities for finger and hand strength activities. Let's see, I'll just highlight, there's some of you may be familiar with the hungry tennis ball. That's an OT favorite where you put a hole or you slice a tennis ball and then you squeeze it and feed the tennis ball. And then you have to throw up the things that you just fed the tennis ball. It's a fun little activity. There's finger isolation and pincer grip activities, bilateral integration, and in-hand manipulation skills. You can do a lot of activities with just a pencil or a marker. There's pencil walks where you turn your finger into a little caterpillar moving up and down. The pencil, there's the helicopter where you're twirling the pencil, and you can change it up and adapt it to meet to the materials that you have access to. And then thumb opposition. I think, look at that. Timing is good. Okay, shall I go on to case study?
Yeah, do it.
Okay, so for the case study, I purposely didn't put a ton of details here because what I want you to focus on is the overall concept of having a student that is referred to us that has illegible writing. Here's your sample. And I did provide some background and presenting issues and assessment plans I'll review real quick, but I want you to focus on, in your setting, what would this look like? And knowing what they're working on in class, what your specific school has available as far as accommodations, how you would tackle the situation. There's not really a right and wrong. I don't want you to just get hung up on right and wrong. I want it to be a collaborative discussion of like, how would you help this student? So here's the global picture. We have Alex. He's an 8-year-old in the States. That would be about 3rd grade in a public school in the US. He has a diagnosis of dysgraphia, which is a writing disorder, and ADHD, no developmental concerns during early childhood. He presents with illegible handwriting, affecting his academic performance, struggles with forming letters, maintaining appropriate spacing, difficulty with consistent letter size and alignment on paper, slow writing speed impacting completion of handwriting assignments. And then during your assessment, you found that he has inconsistent pencil grasp leading to fatigue, poor letter formation, irregular baseline, difficulty maintaining the appropriate line orientation, reduced hand strength for prolonged writing. He is able to isolate each finger and currently uses a hunt and peck method, using mainly that right index finger only for typed work. So the questions become, what are some evidence-based intervention approaches, or what is an evidence-based intervention approach you might take with a student? What would be some goal areas you might want to target? And then what kind of accommodations would you consider for the student, and how would you determine which accommodations to recommend? So I know that was a lot of information. I got through it in time.